Well, this is session number 9 in our series, and we want to talk in this hour about communication and really focus on communication. We'll be looking at a lot of passages in the Proverbs and some passages in Ecclesiastes as we talk about that. I was involved in a counseling session one time with a father and a 15-year-old son, and it was one of these very sad situations where there was a great deal of brokenness in the relationship between this father and his son. And so the son was sullen, he was rebellious, the father was angry, he was exasperated with his son, and I was trying to help this father communicate in godly ways to his son so his son could hear the wisdom of his father, even though that wisdom had been hidden by his reckless words and anger and frustration. And suddenly, in the midst of this counseling session, this father sprang out of his seat and crossed the room, and he perched himself right in front of his son and started pointing his finger at his son, and he said, I'm your father, and you're going to listen to me if it's the last thing I ever do. And the son, he just sat there with this calculated look of indifference, staring at his father as though, you can't touch me, you can't move me, I'm not going to listen to you. It was a very, very ugly scene. I had the privilege of interacting with another dad who was not a shouter. He would just exhaust his children with monologues and with monotone lectures, and where he would just go on and on and on, repeating himself and droning on endlessly and expecting them to listen to him drone on endlessly. And he exhausted them with his lectures. But I want us to think about communication together, and I want you to realize this, that your view of childhood, your paradigm for parenting, for what it means to be a parent, for what you're trying to accomplish as a parent, your paradigm for parenting will dictate your strategies for communication. So your paradigm, the way you view parenting, will determine how you use words as a parent. And the focus of these sessions that I've had with you and will have with you has been on parental nurture. So the focus is on cultivating a nurturing relationship with our kids rather than a focus on control, on managing them, on getting them to do what I want them to do. Because your parenting style will be determined by your goals and your objectives. And harsh words, yelling at our children, scolding them, will track along with a parenting paradigm that is focused on control. But if your model for parenting is nurturing relationship, it's developing a relationship, a cultivating relationship that gives you influence with your children. If that's your model, then your style of communication is going to be marked by restraint, by using pleasant words that promote instruction, by delighting and understanding your kids. And it's those three aspects of communication that I want to talk to you about in this session. I want to talk about restraint. I want to talk about using pleasant words. And I want to talk about understanding our children. But before I get to that, or maybe even as a means of getting to that, I want to separate this teaching in this session as far as possible from just a speech on communication techniques. Because I'm not focused just on the techniques. What I'm focused on is living a life of faith, living a life of joyful confidence in God, living a life that is marked by the fear of the Lord, by a sense of awe, a sense of reverence of God, a sense of realization that I am God's agent, that God has put me in this child's life, that I have a holy mission and a holy trust from God. And it's that fear of God that will motivate the way that you communicate with your children. So think about the wisest man that ever lived Uh, we could think of Solomon. And Solomon lived in joyful, reverent awe of God. He was a man marked by the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." The first step in the path of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 15:33 says it this way, "The fear of the Lord teaches a man wisdom." So speaking with restraint, using pleasant words, delighting myself in understanding my children, reflects wisdom. Wisdom that is found in the fear of the Lord. The qualities that will enable you to speak in ways that are winsome and helpful to your children are spiritual qualities. They're found in awe and joy and reverence of the Almighty God. The greater God is in your vision, the greater God is in your love and esteem, the more godly your communication with your children will be. So I don't want you just to think about communication techniques. I want you to think about the spiritual posture that is necessary for me to communicate in the ways that will be truly helpful to my children. Because godly communication is spiritual, and it is reflective of the fear of the Lord. It's reflective of a life that is lived in awe and reverence of God and delighting in God and loving God and desiring God. So let's think about these, the means of communication. How do I communicate? Restraint. Many people pride themselves on telling it like it is, but the Bible does not prize unbridled speech. Pleasant, nurturing speech is not thoughtless. It's not impetuous. Proverbs 17:27 says, "A man of knowledge uses words with restraint. A man of understanding is even-tempered." Wise people will speak with restraint. A man of understanding will speak with frankness, he'll speak with candor, but his words will be framed in such a way as to benefit those who hear them. And there's some qualities of restrained speech. I have 3 that I want to talk about that are qualities of restrained speech. The first is restrained speech is quiet speech. In Ecclesiastes 9:17, it says, "The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of the rulers of fools." There's power in quiet words. When I was teaching school that I could get the attention of my class more quickly by saying, class, listen, I have something important to say to you. And I would get their attention. If I was shouting at them, class, pay attention, class, they were not focused. Quiet words have more power. You see, shouting trivializes our words because shouting puts meaning in the background and puts emotion in the foreground. Puts meaning in the background, emotion in the foreground. But when I use quiet words, the quiet words of the wise, they put meaning in the foreground and emotion in the background. Another issue of restraint is too many words. Ecclesiastes 6:11 says, "The more words, the less meaning." And how does that profit anyone? In other words, when you throw a lot of words out, all those words begin to have less value. You can wear your child out with too many words. You can simply repeat yourself over and over again. I remember one time I was talking to one of our children, and the plan that night that my wife and I had agreed to is that I would go to this child's room and talk to him and it would be a conversation I would have with him. So my wife was privy to the conversation. She was praying for me that I would be able to communicate effectively the things that I wanted to communicate. And so I went in and we started having this conversation. The conversation went on mainly because I was talking too much. It went on for 45 minutes. And eventually I came out, and after I came out and my wife could get me to the side, she said, "Well, boy, you were in there for a long time. What were you talking about all that time? Tell me about the conversation. You really went on and on." And I summarized the entire conversation with 3 sentences. That's all that was really needed that night, were those 3 sentences. I just went on and on. I repeated myself. I said the same thing again and again. I wore my child out with too many words. That'll exasperate your children. Meaning is lost when words are many. The second issue of too many words is Proverbs 10:19, where words are many, sin is not absent. See, in an emotionally draining conversation with your children, you will find yourself beginning to say things that are unguarded, things that are destructive, things that later you will regret having said. And you'll ask yourself later, how did I end up there? That's not the conversation I wanted to have. What happened? You see, if you let me talk long enough, I'm going to end up saying things I should not have said. Where words are many, sin is not absent. If I talk too long, I will end up saying things that I did not mean to say, that I should not have said. A third issue of restraint is to think first and speak second. The Proverbs puts it this way: the heart of the wise man weighs his answers. I love this proverb because it's a very vivid picture. The wise man puts his words on the balance scale. He puts them on the scale. He asks himself, because he's wise, he asks himself, is this the best thing to say? Is this the best time to say it? Is this the best way to say it? He's weighing his words. The wicked man, in contrast, says in this passage, the mouth of the wicked just gushes evil. It just pours out evil. No careful thought. No restraint. No realization that once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. You can never take your words back. You can say, please forgive me for what I said, but you can't unsay your words. The wicked man just gushes evil, but the wise man weighs his words. Another proverb to that same point is Proverbs 29:20. Do you see a man who speaks in haste? There is more hope for a fool than for him. And Solomon encourages careful speech with the observation, a man finds joy in an apt reply. How good is a timely word, Proverbs 15:23. Words that are carefully chosen. Words that are thoughtful, are a blessing both to the speaker and to the hearer. So we want to avoid too many words, and we want to use our words wisely. Second issue is the manner of our communication. We want to speak with pleasant words. Proverbs 16, verse 21 says it this way: the wise in heart are called discerning, and pleasant words promote instruction. The wisdom of heart. Now remember, when all these verses talk about wisdom, whenever we think wisdom, we've got to think fear of the Lord. The wisdom of heart that is acquired through the fear of the Lord. The wisdom of heart that is reflected in awe of God, in reverence of God, in a life of faith and hope and confidence in God. That kind of wisdom that's acquired through the fear of the Lord is reflected in pleasant speech. Words that are good, words that are kind, words spoken with tact and graciousness promote instruction. Courteous words, tactful words make instruction easy to receive. Pleasant words promote instruction. Harsh words, demanding words, demeaning words do not reflect the gentle confidence of someone who delights in joyful reverence and awe of God. They rather reflect a life that is fearful and angry and controlling. Imagine trying to warn a young teenager of the dangers of companionship with a rebellious and unruly friend. The task of helping your child receive this warning and embrace this warning is great enough. But if you add to that the hurdle of impatience, of harshness in your manner and your tone, you have made an almost impossible barrier for your child receiving your wisdom. Proverbs 16:23 and 24 says, "A wise man's heart guides his mouth, and his lips promote instruction. Pleasant words are honeycomb, sweet to the body, healing to the bones." Let me connect the dots here for you. When it says the wise in heart, we've got to always equate wisdom with the fear of the Lord. So when you read wise in heart, you're talking about a spiritual quality. Psalm 25 verse 14 says, "The Lord confides in those who fear him, and he makes his covenant known to them." So the wise man, the man who has the fear of the Lord, the man who, he's the one that God draws into his confidence. He's the one to whom God reveals his covenant. And these spiritual qualities are what enable a man to guide his mouth in ways that promote instruction. Because he knows that if my words are to be healing, if my words are to bring sweetness to this child, they must be pleasant words. Words that are like a honeycomb. And let me urge you, use pleasant words with your children. When parents are angry, when parents are out of control, when parents are yelling at their children, speaking in ways that are harsh and unkind, it doesn't matter how accurate their assessments are. It doesn't even matter how right they may be about the content they're teaching. When they're angry and out of control and yelling at their children, they will accomplish nothing. In fact, if you could see yourself at those moments, you would realize how futile it is. If you could do a selfie and just see yourself at that moment, angry with your child, yelling at them, pointing your finger at them, speaking so vituperatively that you're spitting little flecks of spit on them as you speak, and your face is red, your eyes are bulging. If you could see yourself at that moment, you would realize how much of a fool you look like. Your child is not looking at you thinking, wow, here's someone who's really wise. Here's someone who's really has important things to say. This is someone I ought to be listening to. Your child sees at that moment an angry, out of control person, and they think, what a fool, what an idiot. What a foolish person. And I've had parents talk to me about this. I've had parents say to me, well, whoever said that pleasant words promote instruction doesn't live in my house. And that's kind of a funny way to say when Proverbs 16 says pleasant words promote instruction. That's not true in my house. That's a statement of unbelief. That statement is false. That's not true. And parents say to me sometimes, when I'm kind, when I'm nice, My children don't listen to me. But when I get angry and I get in their face, then they listen. Sadly, that parent is tragically mistaken. Because the fact that when I get angry, they listen, you can frighten a child into submission for the moment with your anger. But it doesn't mean they're listening. It doesn't mean you're accomplishing any long-term objectives that are good for your child. You can make them obey you for the moment with your anger, but they walk away from you feeling, this is a crazy person. This is not someone I can trust. Your words have not promoted instruction. Pleasant words promote instruction. Angry, out of control words, yelling at our kids, demeaning them, does not promote instruction. It undermines instruction. It keeps you from being effective in the task. And lest you think that is overstated, Proverbs 15:2 says, the tongue of the wise, the tongue of the man who knows the fear of the Lord, the tongue of the man who has the spiritual qualities of awe of God, reverence for God, faith in God, hope in God, delight in God, that man who knows the fear of the Lord, the tongue of the wise man commends knowledge. But the mouth of the fool gushes folly. The parent who is berating his child is the mouth of the fool gushing folly. By contrast, the wise man speaks in a way that commends knowledge. No parent has ever demeaned their children, saying things like, don't be such a loser, only losers hang out with losers. No one who's ever demeaned their children like that has ever had their child turn to them and say, you're right, Mom. You're right, Dad. Thanks for telling it like it is. The child just feels demeaned. They feel abused. They feel angry. They don't benefit from that way of speaking. Proverbs 10:11 says, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Think of your words as a fountain. You want the water from that fountain to be life-giving, pleasant waters, not waters that are brackish and bitter. The fear of the Lord, Proverbs 14:27 says, is a fountain of life. Proverbs 10:21 describes it this way. It says, the lips of the righteous nourish many, but fools die for lack of judgment. The lips of the righteous nourish many. I want my words to my child to be nourishing words. I want them to benefit from these words. Now, no parent that I know would ever feed dog food to their children. But sometimes we speak to our children in ways that we are as unkind as the way we would speak to a dog who's underfoot and who we're angry with. Proverbs 25:11 says, words aptly spoken are like apples of gold in settings of silver. I love this metaphor because I've pondered it a lot and thought, what is being communicated here? The words that are aptly spoken, words that are pleasant and beautiful, are aptly spoken, are not just spoken impetuously. They're not just spoken thoughtlessly. They're like a beautiful collectible. If I had a valuable collectible in my home, someone had crafted out of gold and silver, apples of gold in the settings of silver, and it was beautiful and attractive, and something one would put on the shelf as something very, very nice to enjoy and to see. That collectible would have been crafted by someone who gave thought and consideration to the balance and symmetry and beauty of working with the silver and gold to make something very beautiful, very attractive. And what it says is that words that are aptly spoken, words that are appropriate, are crafted. We think about them. We give thought to them. We think, are they balanced? Are they beautiful? Are they attractive? Will they win my child? Words aptly spoken are like apples of gold in settings of silver. The words of a wise man's mouth, Ecclesiastes 10:12 says, are gracious. They're gracious words. Remember what grace is? Grace is God giving us what we do not deserve. In His grace, God gives forgiveness and everlasting life to people who deserve eternal damnation. And sometimes people will justify wrong speech by thinking, well, that's what he deserves. He acted like a jerk, and so I'm going to treat him like a jerk. In contrast to that, the wise man is gracious. He gives grace. He speaks in ways that are full of grace. So our manner of communication has got to be employing pleasant words. Then finally, the goal of our communication. What's the goal of communication? It's understanding. The finest art of communication is not your ability to express your ideas. Most of us, if we were asked, are you a good communicator? We immediately think of our ability to express our thoughts with words. And that's not the way the Proverbs talk about communication. What the Proverbs recognize is that the finest art of communication is not your ability to express yourself, it's your ability to understand the person with whom you are speaking. Proverbs 18:2 says, the fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinion. So where does the fool find pleasure in a conversation? It's not in understanding the person with whom he speaks. It's in letting his own opinion be expressed. It's in having that person understand him. Well, I think of that proverb, Proverbs 18:2, and I think, how many times have I been a fool in a conversation with my children where I wasn't delighting in understanding them? I was delighting in airing my own opinion. I had a conversation like that one night with one of my sons. I went to his room at bedtime and I said, we need to talk. I said everything I wanted to say. I got done and I said, well, I'm glad we had a chance to talk. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to go to bed. So I prayed for him. I went to bed. Within a few minutes, he's knocking at the door of our bedroom and, Dad, are you guys still awake? Sure, come on in. He said, Dad, I just wanted to say when you left the room, you said you were glad we had a chance to talk. I just wanted to point out I didn't say anything. I said, I'm sorry. You're right. I had a good talk. You had a good listen. I'm sorry. If I had given you a chance to say something, what would you have said? He was a teenager at the time. This is vintage teenager. He said, well, I just wanted to say I didn't say anything. I don't know what I would have said. It doesn't matter anymore. I just wanted to say I didn't say anything. Now there's a subtext here, isn't there? The subtext is, I'm not going to tell you now. At the time you were in my room talking, you weren't interested in what I had to say. I'm not going to tell you now. See, I was a fool that night because I could have said everything I needed to say in the context of asking good questions of my son. I could have been a dad who delighted in understanding him. Instead, all I delighted in was airing my own opinion. Proverbs 18:13 makes this same point. It says of he who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. It's so easy to do that, isn't it? So easy to answer before listening. I see my son coming. I know what you're going to ask. The answer is no. But Dad, what part of no don't you understand? But Dad, I didn't get a chance to ask my question. You don't have to ask your question. I'm your father. Before a word is on your tongue, I know it completely. Isn't that in the Bible somewhere? Now, my child never walks away from this feeling like I am so fortunate to have a dad who can read minds. He walks away feeling like you wouldn't even hear me. You wouldn't even listen to me. You weren't even interested in what I had to say. You didn't even give me consideration. You responded before I even asked my question. That's folly, according to Proverbs 18:13. There's a positive example in Proverbs 20, verse 5. It says, the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. There are deep waters in our kids. I remember one time Margie and I were counseling a family that had a 15-year-old daughter who was very upset, and things were boiling and surging in her that were ready to boil over. And we were counseling the family because the parents had not been effective at engaging and interacting with their children, and so we were trying to counsel them, and at the same time we were also counseling this young woman because Margie was meeting with her just simply to give her a constructive place to take all the things that were boiling and surging within her. And she would ask her questions. She would say, here's some things I want you to think about next week, and put pencil and paper together and make some notes on these questions. And she would ask her questions. And this girl would come back the next week for counseling with page after page after page of a little tiny script, deep, insightful understanding of herself, her family, the spiritual dynamics of their family life. There were incredibly deep waters in this child. But the parents' style of communication and interacting with the child was such that they were not able to draw out those deep waters. So the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters. There are deep waters in your kids. And we need to be people who know how to ask good questions, who know how to listen, and not just be thinking about what we're going to say next, but actually listening to what our children say. And even asking them questions to clarify our understanding of what they're saying. So we want to ask good questions. We want to listen to what's being said. We want to listen to what's not being said, because sometimes that's just as informative as what is being said. We want to ask good questions and be people who are skilled to draw out those deep waters in our children. What is our hope in all of this? These are such important things for our kids, and yet we all fail at them so often. I know I have failed so often in being a father who delights in understanding and showing the goodness of God's ways to my kids. And it's so easy for me to look at the things God calls me to and think, this is impossible, the standard is too high. How can I ever be this kind of a dad? And I want to encourage you with these words from Ephesians chapter 3 that says, I pray that you might be rooted and established in love, and may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, so that you might be filled with all the measure of the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work in us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. The hope for us to be the parents who speak in such wise ways, who use words with restraint, who avoid too many words, who use quiet words that promote instruction. The hope for us to be parents whose manner of speech is marked by pleasant words that promote instruction. The hope for us to be people who delight not just in airing our own opinion, but actually in understanding our children. The hope for all those things is not found by looking inside. It's not found in just new resolutions. It's found in Christ. It's Christ who can enable us. And the promise here is that he is able to do immeasurably all more than we could ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work in us. So we have hope. We have hope that we can be the dads that we want to be. We have hope that we can be the moms we want to be. We have hope that we can speak in ways that are truly helpful to our children, because God is powerful. And God is full of grace. And God can enable us to love our children, to delight in God, to be people who know the fear of the Lord, who live in awe and reverence of God, who are empowered by the Spirit to speak to our children in ways that are truly helpful to them. May God bless you and enable you to do that.